This is Fred Beck from Fred Talks Fighting. Today I'm very lucky joined by once again James Lynch. So James, is that a new t-shirt you got? Releasing merchandise now.
Yeah, no, it's an old one, but yeah, I just happened to wear it today. It's my Lynch on Sports shirt. So yeah, there you go. Got to look good.
Yeah, you gotta put the brand out there. And you know how you got your mic just stretching out onto your screen there. Do you
Yeah.
think you're getting like a personalized mic flag or anything, mic cover?
Can I personalize my mic cover with this? I don't know if you can. I'd have to look into it. This one's a little bit tougher to put something on there because of the way it's being held, but I can look into it. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, before I get like a little branding there. So
Yeah.
one thing I do want to touch on is before we do talk about the fights, I'm talking about Hasbulla because Hasbulla's been over the news. What are your thoughts on him? Because he was kind of headbutting Khabib there at the end of the cage.
Yeah, he's become like a superstar, a phenom or whatever with that with the MMA fan base. I think it's kind of cool. It seems like the fighters are into it as well. He was cage side, he was having a lot of fun. It's just sort of like an extra sort of side note on everything that really, is I think it's kind of entertaining, to be honest.
I think it kind of attracts more fans to MMA at the end of the day. So the more exposure it's going to get, the better almost.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great way of looking at it. I agree.
So one fight I do want to start on before we go to the main event is Justin Gaethje, Michael Chandler. Do you think this is the most fan friendly matchup the UFC can put on right now?
Absolutely. It's fight of the year on paper easily. Two very similar fighters as well, both wrestlers turned into strikers. Both were considered two of the best lightweights outside of the UFC for many years, right? With Gaethje in World Series of Fighting and Chandler in Bellator. And there's a lot of implications here as well, obviously. I think if Gaethje wins, he might get the next title shot over, say, in Islam Makhachev or whoever else is sort of working their way up the division. If Chandler wins, I think that helps out Islam's case for what he did last week, because I don't think they're just going to give Chandler a rematch for the title immediately, regardless of if Poirier wins or whatever. But yeah, it's a really, really even fight. Like, I'm having a hard time picking that one. I am ultimately going to go with Justin Gaethje, but I think that's a 50-50 fight, because a lot of people are like, well, Justin was exposed against Khabib. Well, I'm like, Khabib's not Michael Chandler. They're different fighters, right? So I don't think that, people talking about Gaethje getting taken down in that fight, I don't know if that'll happen in this one. And I think both of them are going to go toe to toe and see who the better striker is.
Do you think it's a shame the fight's not 5 rounds in a main event though?
Yeah, it is. I see. This is where I have issue with the whole Diaz rule. Like, why is a Diaz fight just because his last name's Diaz get to be 5 rounds and this one isn't? This seems like a fight that should be 5 rounds. So yeah, big miss on the UFC's end, in my opinion.
Yeah, 5 rounds of that. I'll go ahead to. It might not even go 3 rounds though. So you never know at the end of the day. And then of course the main event, Kamaru Usman, Kobe Covington. Before we talk about our predictions, what you think is going to happen, how do you think Kamaru's improved the last fight, and how do you think Kobe's improved? Because who's Kamaru? He's beat Gilbert Burns, Kobe's beat Tyron Woodley, and Kamaru's also beat one more fighter, which is left my head.
Jorge Masvidal.
Boy, Masvidal, there we go.
Yeah. So I think look, like the pick has got to be Usman, just because of what we've seen. Like, we're taking a big guess on if Colby's gotten better since the first fight, because we don't know. Maybe he has, right? We learned our lesson in the Brian Ortega and Korean Zombie fight. I always bring that up because, like, that was a fight where we thought, oh, there's no way that Brian Ortega is going to outstrike the Korean Zombie, and sure enough, he did, and he won that fight. So I always reserve judgment just for what we've seen and what we haven't. I still think Usman does win. Another thing I always have to point out is that, the Masvidal one was great and good that he finished him in the last fight. That's very tough to do, but it's also Masvidal, right? Like, I think Colby Covington would beat Jorge Masvidal. So in some ways, I feel like people romanticize about that win a little bit too much. The Burns win was absolutely spectacular. Not going to take any credit away from that, but two of those wins are against the same guy, and a guy that I think Colby would beat. So I think Usman's like a 3-1 favorite. I would agree with that just because of what we've seen, but also I think Colby has a chance to surprise here as well, just because, maybe he has got better. The first fight, he was at ATT, had a million distractions with teammates not liking him. He's at a gym now where, there's no beefs, nothing to worry about. And the camp's focused primarily on him. American Top Team's a very big gym. Saying that, though, obviously Usman's leveled up with Trevor Whitman, but saying that, Trevor Whitman also has two other fighters on the card in Rose and Gaethje. So how much of his attention has been divided this fight week? The safer bet here is Usman, but I think at like plus 240, Colby Covington's coming in there. Might as well throw something on him. Their first fight was close. Don't let anyone else tell you otherwise. It was a close fight going into that 5th round.
That's a very good point about the coaching situation. In the first fight, did you agree with the stoppage?
I did. Yeah. I'm not one of these, people that said that Mark Goddard screwed it up or whatever. I think Colby was, not in, making his way to come back here. And I also don't think Colby would have won the round. So therefore I don't think he would have won the fight. So yeah, that whole angle, don't agree with that. Just if anything, prove us wrong in the rematch, Colby.
I also see a lot of things on Twitter. People kind of, from that first rematch, from the first fight, Usman and Colby Covington, Kobe gained a lot more fans from that fight, a lot more respect. Do you think people are starting to kind of like Kobe Covington a lot more now than they used to?
Maybe like Colby the
babyface.
fighter. Yeah. Maybe Colby the fighter, but Colby outside the cage. No, I think is, if anything, people hate him even more. You know, we're the sort of the climate we're in right now. I think it's very easy to pick Colby as a target. So much so that like I'm even hearing people leading into this fight talking about that first fight, saying Usman destroyed him in the first fight. Well, it was a pretty close fight up until the finish. So I think that has also sort of led to people not liking Colby and kind of forgetting how good. Because here's the thing: you take everything else outside of Colby, his personality, whatever. He's a pretty good fighter, and he's still the only fighter to give Usman the closest fight that he's had. I know Masvidal went the distance with him the first fight, but still, he was never in that fight. Colby at least had opportunities in that first fight with Usman as opposed to Masvidal.
Yeah, I know it's certainly a good fight. When you watch that first fight, it was a war for since a while at last anyway. And it's one more point I want to touch on is Conor McGregor. Last time we speak about every 4 or 5 months, and I think last time we spoke, obviously they're going to the rematch. What do you think is next for Conor? Because I don't think it will be, well, maybe it could be Poirier, because it could be Poirier 3 if Poirier gets a belt. But what do you think is next for Conor McGregor?
Well, what's next is he's got to make sure he doesn't get in any trouble before he's actually cleared to come back. And now, because I mean, it seems like Conor's getting in the headlines for all the wrong reasons here. And I don't care how popular you are, at some point that stuff's got to catch up and, you know, impact your fight career. But I think Nate Diaz is the fight. You know, Dana's been talking about how, you know, he has something lined up for Nate Diaz. He's got 1 fight left. The Conor fight makes the most sense. I think that's a winnable fight for Conor. I also think it's a huge fight for Conor that they've always had in the back pocket. And with the fact that Nate's only got 1 fight left, you would think that's got to be Conor, at least I would think. I don't think he fights Poirier again. I think Poirier, you know, he could win the belt and just say, I'm good, you know, so to speak. Or if Oliveira wins, then that obviously spoils things. But no, I think with Conor, it's going to be a pretty big name. And I think it's going to be a fight. If I'm the UFC, I'm giving him an opponent that he can beat, because I think fighting Poirier again is a mistake. He loses another fight. Then what happens? Like, what do you do with him? His days as a contender are completely gone. At least if he fights someone like, remember when he fought Cerrone, people are already talking about him being back in the title picture, despite the fact that it was Cerrone. So I think if the UFC, you got to be careful here. I think like you know, a Diaz fight, a Tony Ferguson fight, those are all fights where I think are winnable for Conor. And I think that's the route they should go when he comes back. And it's not going to be for a bit because he's still recovering.
I like the Tony Ferguson Nate Diaz fight, but you just mentioned Tony Ferguson there.
Well, they could do Tony and Nate as well. I mean, that's an option too. But I just think like that would be a real big miss by the UFC not doing that trilogy fight, just because it's one apiece.
Yeah, that's very true. I said at the start of the interview that that's another fan-friendly matchup, Tony Ferguson and Nate Diaz there. Yeah, so thanks so much for your time again, James. Always good to talk to you. So I'll put your channel link in the description, but where can we find your podcast, merchandise?
Everything is just at Lynch on Sports. I'm always posting stuff on Twitter, my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Lynch on Sports. Everything you can find there. And I put all my content on playlists in there, so it's easy to find. So
awesome.
There you go.
Awesome.
Cool, man.
Thanks so much for your time, James. We'll catch up soon, mate.
Yeah, anytime, man. Appreciate it. Have a good one.